What is good, Tsla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I want to break down what's going on with the economic calendar, as we had Jerome Powell giving a speech that was very important, not to mention new developments in the charts for Tesla and the others. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with Tesla in the markets. So, looking at Tesla, we're on a nice uptrend so far as we're pushing towards the 300 resistance. If we do break this, we could be looking for a little attempt to push even more. But I do want to give you guys a warning about that, because when it comes to the market, we've been pushing and pushing and pushing, and we are due for a pullback soon. I'm not saying it has to happen as soon as tomorrow, but there is a risk of it. So just keep that in mind. I do believe the market's going to try to go higher in the morning, but you have to remember that we're approaching some tough resistance. We're seeing SPY getting very close to 600. We're seeing Tesla getting very, 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 very close to like 300. And if we do break 300 just temporarily, we will see if Tesla could hold it or not. So you want to be very, very careful during times like this, and we'll see what ends up happening. So I will talk more about these charts in just a couple of minutes. Let's first talk about some data. Just know this, guys. Okay, tech was holding up very, very nicely. We saw the Nvidias, the Apples, the Microsofts pushing very, very well. But finance started slowing down, and then the rest of the market was quite mixed, except for consumer durables, as we saw Tesla come out and start to push. So Tesla did a good job at holding up relative to its sector, and the rest of the sectors were more mixed. Finance was weak and tech was strong. That's what you have to remember. So with that being said, what happened today with Jerome Powell and his speech? Just know this. Tomorrow is Friday, November 8th, 2024. Okay, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment data and 5-year inflationary expectations coming out at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We also have Bowman giving a speech. But don't forget that although each of those may affect the markets, Jerome Powell's speech and what he said could still affect the markets tomorrow. Sometimes you still get those delayed reactions to FOMC. So don't forget about that, guys. Jerome Powell pumped the markets a little bit. The market didn't move that much. It did push a bit. We could try to push a little bit thanks to Jerome Powell in the morning, but then we'll see what happens after that as we approach some tough resistance. So what did Jerome Powell say? The Fed gave us a 25 basis point cut, which is what we were expecting. And then when it comes to what he was saying, he said that the Fed still has their duty to continue to do what's necessary for the economy, bring down inflation to 2%, and maintain a labor market that's decent. He says it's very important for them to do that. And then he also talks about how with other factors that are developing, the Fed still has a job to do. He's very confident that the strength is going to be maintained, at least for their security holdings. Then he also talked, he also talked about how they're going to continue to expand the economy at a solid pace. He said the labor market remains stable despite payrolls slowing down a bit, and overall, he's very, very optimistic for the economy. He's just kind of saying the same things over and over again. Now, he was asked a question and some questions about, Trump's presidency. When it comes to the changes coming, the Fed is going to be making necessary adjustments if that comes to that. So he did talk about that. And then he was also asked about what's going to likely happen with inflationary changes. He said this. He said that if inflation starts decreasing at a faster rate, the Fed is going to adjust and they can start cutting faster too. And if the same thing happens or the opposite, they're going to once again do the same thing. So they're prepared to just be very reactive. They did expect some bumps in inflation here and there, but overall, they believe we're in a very healthy place. And then also, the last thing was they asked him, what if Trump were to ask him to resign? And Powell said he's not going to resign just like that because it's not that easy. There's a big system for Powell to get fired, basically, or essentially. It's not that easy for him to just get fired. Trump just can't say you're fired and that's it. There is a process that has to be done. The board has to look through it, the Fed and many other bodies. So just keep that in mind. That's what's basically going on. I also want to call out the fact that there has been some talk about how President Trump has different views of Jerome Powell. He did criticize Powell, saying he was very slow to act when it comes to dealing with inflation. And right, you could argue the same thing is the truth. But here's the thing. I don't personally think that Trump is going to fire Powell just like that. I don't think he's going to do that. I think that it's more likely that he is just going to pressure him to cut rates more and to continue to ease on monetary policy. I think that's most likely what's going to be happening. I'm not worried about Trump firing Powell or anything like that, even though it was asked. So I just want to give you guys my opinion on that. All right, so that's what I'm basically seeing, at least on the news. For other factors out there, we had some earnings. Just know this: Moderna had their earnings in the morning. I went over them. They did better than expected because they did show a profit when Wall Street was not expecting that. So good news for them. Then we had DraftKings and Rivian announcing their earnings. Let's start off with Rivian. So for Rivian, there is some news right over here about how they did miss on earnings, but then their guidance was pretty strong for Q4. And let's talk about why that is. So their loss per share was at 99 cents adjusted. That is, once again, not as good as what we were expecting. And revenue is at 874 million, below expectations. However, if I go right over here, you guys could see that they did say something that was very bullish, and that's right over here. They are reconfirming their plans to achieve a modest positive gross profit for the fourth quarter, and that got Wall Street excited. That's why the share price went up. So guidance is still pretty good for Q4. That is optimistic. For DraftKings, we saw the share price dip quite a bit. Revenue jumped 39% in Q3 to $1.1 billion. However, their average revenue per MUP was down below 10% year over year for the quarter. It's about 103 to 103.99 million, which is once again below what we were expecting. The consensus was 103.99. So that's part of why we ended up dipping. And then guidance was not that strong. It was just like so. So that's the reason why the share price dipped a little bit. There was nothing that would really impress investors enough. For more data, just know this, guys, we have essentially 325,000 or almost that many calls expiring. And we have over 726,000 puts expiring for a 2.24 put to call ratio with 580 being max pain. So if I was a market maker, I would probably try to push the market a little higher, then maybe cause a small dip, maybe cause a little bit of a dip to get us closer to max pain, maybe. And then we'll see excuse me, we'll see at the end of the day how this looks, because the option chain could still be adjusted. Will we see a big bounce towards the end of the day, or will we see a dump? We're just gonna have to determine that a little bit later, depending on how options end up looking for tomorrow. But for now, just know there's mostly puts expiring. This may cause a little bit of a push in the markets in the morning. If there's a dip in the middle of the day, it could be coming, followed by another pump towards the end of the day. So I hope that's as clear as possible. I'll talk more about that in my later video, or more about that in my later videos and more maybe in just a couple of minutes. For more news, there is some news that Mexico is open to the possibility of opening a gigafactory over there, even after President Trump has won, because of the tariff adjustments. That's why there's some questions about that. And they're waiting for a very, very big update. So just keep that in mind. Just know this, guys. When it comes to Elon Musk, there's been a lot of talk from Mexico's economy minister, Ebrard. I may have said that wrong, but he basically stated that he wants to meet up with Elon Musk soon so that he tells them exactly what he's thinking to see if they can once again continue to move these projects forward. So there is still a possibility that we get that Mexican gigafactory. There's still been a lot of talk about that, and Musk should be meeting up with the minister very, very soon, and we'll see when that is. And that's going to be very important. Tesla paused the project this summer because of other factors, but we will see what happens moving forward. We're hoping that they continue the project, and we'll see what ends up happening. We have basically 115 million in volume above average, which is not bad whatsoever for Tesla. Short volume is still going up, though we are seeing some shorts piling into Tesla as a result. Piper Sandler gave Tesla an overweight rating. Price-to ratio is going up as Tesla's building a lot of strength right now compared to the market. And we tend to be green about 49% of the time on Fridays. We tend to see more volatility at 1 p.m. and also at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Besides that, guys, I didn't see anything else that was too crazy on the news, but I do want to call out the fact that over the last couple of days, we've been seeing a lot of sell orders, at least for Tesla. As this thing is going higher, we're seeing more and more sellers stepping in. So what do I see, at least for this moving forward? What is my opinion of Tesla? It's very simple. We are looking bullish because when you zoom out like this, we're continuing to make higher highs and higher lows, and we're doing a very, very good job. But notice the rate at which we're running is now slowing down. Let me show you why. So we were on this downtrend ever since Tesla gave us their big announcements. And then what happened is this: we basically saw the share price see an explosive move up. And it wasn't really as explosive. It pushed a little bit more, but now it's starting to stagnate. So you guys can see how resistance is getting tougher. And now it's becoming more difficult for Tesla to really break out. So I think that if we were to lose 295, we're looking for this imbalance at 290 is our target. That's also where we have previous resistance. If we're bearish, that's what you're looking for. If we're bullish, you want to see Tesla break past 300 and hold above it for at least 4 hours. We have 300 and 302.5 and 305 as our potential targets. Make sure you watch those levels very carefully. One thing worth mentioning is that when Tesla got a breakout, we came back down to previous resistance becoming support before we continued higher. So now we're breaking out, but then what could be happening is we come back down to previous resistance becoming support before we continue higher again. So that's something that I think that could be happening to Tesla. What is my opinion of Tesla? I think that tomorrow morning we might attempt to push because every morning for the last 4 days, Tesla did push in the morning. So I think there's going to be an attempt to get up to 300. I think it's going to be a big fight. I'm not sure if we're going to be holding above that quite yet, though. It might take some time for Tesla to really get comfortable at these levels because we pumped so much with no pullback. So we could push for 300, maybe the low 300s tomorrow morning. But then as time goes on, intraday tomorrow, we might see the market slow down. I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla slows down as volume is slowing. So we could be pushing to the low 300s. Then we could slow down, make our way back down to the 295 area, and then start to consolidate for the rest of the day until the end of the day when we get either one more push or a dip. Possibly a push could be coming end of day, so we'll see. But look for more upside in the morning than a dip intraday before we see some sideways price action as the most likely case. For SPY, we are looking more bullish, but just know this. We are approaching this upward trend line of resistance, which is where we had our wedge. So let me just show you what it looked like. It looked just like this. As you guys can see, we had this nice looking wedge that was developing on SPY. So now we have this yellow trend line acting as our resistance. It's not going to be easy to break past that. So what this means is we could be looking for an attempt to push a little higher on SPY, but resistance is going to be very tough, so just be careful. We could touch the high of the day again, if not 598. So I think this 596 to 598 area is going to be kind of tough. And then I think as time goes on, we might slow down, see a little bit of a dip, and we might see SPY revisit 594. If it doesn't hold us, we're looking for 592. So look for a pop and then a drop, and we could be revisiting these lows before we try to bounce again at the end of the day. So hopefully that's not too complicated. A little pop and drop should be coming tomorrow as we're hitting some tough resistance, and then we could bounce at the end of the day because there's still buyers who are present. That's most likely what I'm seeing. That's why for Tesla, I said the same thing. We might push a little higher for like the low 300s, then get a bit of a pullback to the 295 area, if not lower, before we try to bounce again. So keep that in mind for Tesla. For ES, we look more bullish. We're approaching 6,000. We could be looking at some tough resistance up there. So 6,050 could be very tough. 6,020 as well. And our support to watch for is at 5,980, not to mention 5,950. I think we might try to pop a little bit into the low 6,000s. Then we might start dipping back down to 5,980. Not a little bit below that before we try to bounce again. So we'll see what ends up happening. Look for a pop to the low 6,000s before we start dipping back down to 5,980. And we'll see what happens after that if we get some kind of bounce. For other factors out there, we have Nvda. I think Nvidia remains resilient. We're looking for 150 tomorrow, if not 152. So look for a little bit more upside. And then if we do reach 152, I do think we might dip into the middle of the day back down to 148 before we try to bounce again. So look for more upside for 150 to 152. A dip back down, a lot of sideways price action, most likely on Nvidia for tomorrow. For Bitcoin, the same thing. We might be looking for a small dip here. We are slowing down. Might be retesting 74,800 before we try to bounce again. So I think there might be some kind of pullback coming to the markets, a little pop and a drop before we see some buyers step in again. That's what I'm seeing for Bitcoin as well, as we are due for that dip. For NQ, we're pushing to about 21,250. We'll see if that breaks or not. If it does break, we're looking for 21,300. But I believe that between 21,250 and 21,300, we're going to be seeing some tough resistance. So we might end up hitting resistance in that range, then slowing back down to 21,100 as the most likely case. Look for a pop and a drop as the most likely move, and we'll see what happens after that. Be very, very patient nonetheless. For the QQQ, we look more bullish. We could push closer to about two resistance areas, which are between 514 and 516. We might be pushing in that range. And then I think it's going to be a tough resistance. So I think that very close to that range around 515, we might see the QQQ slow down. So look for an attempt to push higher. We'll see if we break it or not. If not, we could be dipping back down for our support around 510. So 515 then 510 could be coming tomorrow, followed by a bounce. But that's what I think is the most likely case. For Aapl, we look a little bit more bullish. As long as we don't lose 226, I do think that there is a good chance that this will attempt to push higher. So we could be looking for 228 to 230 to be tested right up here. Then we might be looking for a dip back down for 225. And we'll see if we bounce or not off of that. But look for a little bit more upside before we see another reaction and give this the time it needs. For Netflix, we have 800 as our resistance. I think we push a little bit higher for 800, but I think it's going to be a tough resistance. I don't think we're just going to break that easily as we have a bearish divergence that's developing. So I think we might test 800 on Netflix, and then we might be looking for a dip back down for basically 790, and we'll see if we get a bounce or not. But for now, that's the most likely case that I'm essentially looking at. For CELH or Celsius, we're on a bit of a downtrend right over here as well. We're looking at this resistance around 30.5, not to mention 31. Might push a little bit before it starts to dip back down for 29. So look for a pop and drop as the most likely move. For Palantir, I think that we're hitting some tough resistance around 56, and we have this main support to watch for around 54. So we're kind of stuck in the middle. I think that there's a chance this might attempt to push a little bit higher for the 56 area before it starts to dip back down. So look for an attempt to get back down to 54 most likely. For Supermicro, we look more bullish. We'll see if 26.64 breaks. If that breaks, we're looking for 28.5, followed by 30. Look for more upside for the 26.6 area, maybe above that. Then we could be looking for a rejection, so we'll see how it goes. Rivian looks more bullish. We're looking for 10.27 as resistance and then 10.4. Might be pushing up to these resistance areas before we see a dip back down for the low 10s. But look for more upside. I think the mid 10s is likely coming before we see a big reaction after that. For SoFi, we're on a nice uptrend right here. We're going to be looking for an attempt to push to this resistance around the low 12s, but then it's a tough resistance and we could be making a lower high here. So look for a pop and a dip. We might be on our way back down to about 11.55. So a pop and drop is most likely what's coming in my personal opinion. We'll see how that ends up going. For the IWM, we look a little bit weaker here. We did try to push a bit. We could attempt to grab liquidity at 238, but I anticipate that 235 is coming, if not a little bit lower, to 233. So look for some downside as another potential move. For AMD, if we lose 149, we're looking for 146. As long as we're above this, we're looking for 152. I'm presuming we're going to most likely push for 152.5 or above. So look for a little bit more upside. I think that we might be looking for AMD to push for 152.5 or above, and then we'll see what happens after that. For ARM, we look a little bit weaker. We did hit resistance up here at 153, and we could be on our way back down to 148, if not 145, as the most likely move. For Coinbase, we look more bullish. As long as we don't lose 250, I think that we could push for 260 temporarily. But then this is going to be a tough resistance, so look for a little bit of an attempt around 260 before we dip back down. Look for a little bit more upside, and then we could be looking for a rejection on coin. For Amazon, I think we're going to dip a little bit. We did attempt to push to 212, but it's a tough resistance, especially as we are slowing down in terms of momentum. So I think we might be on our way back down to about 208 tomorrow. For others out there, such as Meta, I think that we are bullish overall. We could be on our way back up to 608, but we may get an initial sell-off before we continue higher. So we might actually sell off towards 590, if not 585, before we see some buyers step in and try to defend. So give this the time it needs. Microsoft looks more bullish. We have this imbalance up here around 433. I think we might be pushing for 428, then reject back down to 420, 424 or so, maybe a little bit below that before we try to bounce. So we'll see how things end up going. There's a nice imbalance to fill up here, so I think that we could attempt to go higher. Might pop a bit and start dipping back down for 424, and we'll see what happens after that. For Google is trying to push. We're essentially looking for 183.8 as our resistance. I think that we might push a little bit higher for that before we get a rejection, so there might be a little pop coming, then a dip afterwards. People are asking me about GameStop. I think it's bullish as long as we don't lose 22.93 or the 20 EMA. We're favoring a move back up for 23.8 to 24. For now, AMC is more bearish. We did pop and then drop after earnings. It might be dipping to about 4.2 before it tries to bounce, so be on the lookout for that. DJT is getting rejections again. I think it might be dipping for 25 flat, if not 23.5. So look for a little bit more downside, and we'll see what the move happens to be. The VIX is more bearish for now. There's no sign of a bounce, so give this the time it needs. It does have a tendency, though, of seeing some strong support right here around 14.5 to 15. So the VIX does like to bounce off these levels. So maybe the market is about to see a little dip as a result. The VIX is at some key support. Maybe the market pumps a little bit more before it sees a dip. So just keep that in mind. Right now, the 10-year did dip a little bit after the FOMC meetings. It's not necessarily a surprise. And then the dollar index is also dipping a little bit. So we'll have to see what this ends up doing. It's not really affecting the market as much as it usually does. So with that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. I know this video is kind of late, guys. I was running kind of late. Tesla might try to push for 300 or the low 300s, but there might be a little bit of a dip coming back down to the 290 areas. Just keep that in mind. I just want to say, once again, I really appreciate you guys so much for listening. So please have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow morning before the market opens to give you guys another update. Thanks for listening. Look for a pop and drop tomorrow morning and maybe another bounce towards the end of the day. And just keep those levels in mind that I called out. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great night and peace out.